What do you do when you have a bully boss? Let's say your boss used to love you and now they've suddenly gone cold. They're leaving you out of meetings. They seem really irritated with you. You're not sure what happened, but it's keeping you up at night and you're worried about your job, which in this economy, everybody is, but now you're extra worried. And you may be wondering, did I do something wrong? But if I did, what could it possibly have been? I've been working my ass off. The answer may surprise you. You may be hated for your competence. In this video, I'll be talking about the 5 signs that your boss is threatened by you, why bosses bully their best employees, the 4-phase pattern of how this plays out, with a special mention of the pet to threat pipeline, which if you've been following me for a while, you've seen me talk about this. This is especially relevant for Black women, though lately over the past couple of years, we've seen on social media a lot of people relating to this. I'm going to talk about why and the unwritten rules from my research that apply. Then I'm going to go over strategies to protect yourself with the bully boss and talk about when you need outside help versus when you don't. And yes, I have a big kid microphone now. I'm working on my audiobook, so that should hopefully be out relatively soon. For those who are new, I'm Dr. Anna Call-Schmidt. I research the unwritten rules of work for the working class and neurodivergence. I'm very interested in social class mobility through employment, and I've worked in the public, private, and academic sectors for the past decade and a half. I help organizations improve their culture to actually get the results that they want, and I coach people on how to get through these systems and navigate situations like this with a bully boss, because we have a leadership crisis. And my goal, my mission with my business is to get competent, empathetic people in positions of power because we need you. Okay, let's get into it. So what is a bully boss? A bully boss is a supervisor who is threatened by your competence, who sees your ability to do your job well as a threat to their position, even if that is not even on your radar and you have no intention of doing so. They may not even see you as a threat to their position, but you could also be a threat to their ego or sense of control. And instead of supporting your growth and seeing that as also a win for them and their team, they actively or passively undermine you. This is especially likely to happen in organizations that do not reward leaders for being good leaders, that do not evaluate performance of supervisors based on how well their team is doing, but how well that individual person is still doing. Culture and systems work together. See my video on capitalism for a framework on that. And this isn't about your manager having an off day or a one-off, okay? This is about a pattern of behavior where as soon as you demonstrate excellence, that they see you as a threat. When they see you, they feel less secure, and so they start to intentionally sabotage you, even if sabotaging you hurts the team they are supervising, hurts the work itself. Trust me, that's why in every chapter of my book on the unwritten rules of work, I gave examples of organizations, positive and negative, and how they've handled the unwritten rules, because these unwritten rules very often sabotage the business goals, cost a lot of money, and can even get people killed. Why do bully bosses exist? I've said it before, I'll say it again, and I'm sure I'm going to keep saying it. The current system is run by narcissists and psychopaths. Is there anything going on right now that would tell us about that? I don't know what that could be. We have hierarchical pyramid structures in place, meaning that only a limited number of people can get to the top. And as you get higher, there is room for fewer and fewer. And we are seeing in late stage capitalism that what trickles down to the bottom is hardly anything, making more and more scarcity at the bottom, while even fewer people have the most at the top. In my book, I have a controversial phrase where I talk about why I included non-binary people, even though they were only 2% of my sample. And that's because 2% of our world has 50% of the global wealth. Think about that. That's how top-heavy our pyramid structure is. It's very unnatural, and historically, over thousands of years, we have seen that empires with this kind of structure do not survive. For all the obsession fellas have with the Roman Empire, it crashed, okay? Top-heavy hierarchical structures create zero-sum thinking. The idea that someone else benefiting means that you are being robbed. If you move up, someone else doesn't, and if you're good at your job, someone else looks bad at their job. So managers with zero-sum thinking think if you look good, that they look bad, instead of that a goal of leadership should be to develop your people. It should make both of you look good. But that's not the current system we're operating in. I frequently remind my clients of a phenomenon I call the hierarchy scramble. Yet ironically, in all of this with the top-heavy hierarchy, people rarely blame the top of the hierarchy with most of the resources. The reason being, they are afraid of the top and they want to be like them. This is very common in the US, a worship of the wealth and the rich. However, people also feel very insecure about people who are above them on the hierarchy. So they don't want to think about that too much. Instead, to make themselves feel bigger, they have to look down the ladder. They have to look at someone who has less than them and stomp on them. I've made several videos of how white women do this to women of color, how men do this with issues of like domestic violence, and as we're seeing increasingly in the news lately, pedos. Smiling so I don't vomit. No one wants to feel like they are at the bottom of the hierarchy. For all that we see of people talk about how they made it from nothing and started from the bottom, nobody really wants to be at the bottom. So if people are at maybe a rung number 3, they're going to blame rung number 1 for coming to steal their resources, even though, again, 50% of all of the world's resources are on rung number 10. That's it. If you're at rung number 3, rung number 4 is more of a threat to you than rung number 10. And this isn't just a theory. We see this in practice in organizations. Again, there's something really big going on right now that doesn't just have royalty and politicians on the list. We have a stunning amount of business executives, stunning only to people who haven't been paying attention, because we have rewarded narcissism, psychopaths, and Machiavellianism to get to the top. And when you have narcissists at the top, people who are very competent at their jobs come across as a threat. As you know, in my book and on here, I have given Boeing as the example. And I know it's the same example, but it's one that has not been resolved, is life-threatening, and it just keeps doing the same problem over and over again. In 2003, the Boeing CEO, a pupil of Jack Welch, one of his star students, announced that Boeing would no longer be an engineering firm, it would be a finance firm. They literally said that out loud. And since then, we have seen the competent engineers who raise safety concerns be treated as too emotional or a problem, and where some of them are no longer alive, and it has been said because of the emotional abuse they received. The people who knew what they were doing became threats to the people in power, the ones who were making the financial decisions. People in power in toxic organizations use the unwritten rule of compliance, the unwritten rule that you cannot disagree with people in power. So what happens? Those people lost their jobs, planes crash, people die. And yet, Boeing still has contracts. This is what happens when competence threatens the hierarchy. And I don't think enough of you understand that social class mobility is a threat to the hierarchy and the part of the hierarchy that has the most resources. While social class mobility is the backbone of American ideology, it does not happen as dramatically and as consistently as we think it does. It is a threat to people at the top of the hierarchy. The upper class has learned not to tell us that they think they're genetically superior to the rest of us, for the most part. They've learned not to explicitly say, I think I'm better than you and I deserve what I have and you deserve to have so much less. Though it is getting louder these days. To keep us from revolting against them because we far outnumber them. They use tools like racism, sexism, and ableism, which I outline in each chapter of my book and I talk on here about a lot. And they tell us that if at any time we wanted to join them, we could. Just work really hard, and when you get up the ladder, you can be with us. You can sit with us. Yeah. And a side benefit of that is that by telling us to work harder to join them, they benefit off our hard work. They benefit off of paying us hourly and salary and you busting your ass and leaving when and how you move up completely up to them. There are all kinds of unwritten rules along the way that impact how you actually move up that they're not going to tell you, and that's what my whole book and channel are about. But anybody who actually succeeds and shows that they are competent enough to move up the ladder is a threat to them because it threatens the narrative that they are superior, that they are inherently better, that they deserve to be there. Especially now where we're like 2 generations in of Nepo babies. There are very, very, very few people in power who have actually moved up and started their own businesses. A lot of the people who are in power now are the children and grandchildren of white dudes who did that a couple generations ago when they didn't have to compete with women and people of color along the way. Even then it was only a handful because there's still far more working class white dudes than rich white dudes, right? So if you have just inherited this wealth, let's say you're one of the Roy children from Succession, it is an extreme threat to your beliefs about yourself and your status to have someone who's actually pulling on those bootstraps and knows what they're doing be rewarded for their labor and move up the ladder. And bully bosses target certain people over others. While no one is safe, having more marginalized identities makes you more vulnerable. Because as you have more marginalized identities, more weight to carry with you on that ladder, more hurdles along the way of that ladder, you are more and more and more of a threat to their perceptions of themselves as the deserving. There is nothing more threatening to classism and elitism in America than a Black woman succeeding and moving up the career ladder. Not a damn thing. Because what it says when that happens is that with a 400-year advantage in the U.S., inheriting wealth, not having laws against your body and your hair, all of those things, maybe you aren't so special if she can get to the top. Maybe the system was just built by your grandparents and passed on to you. And the rules specifically favor you, written and unwritten. The phenomenon we see on how Black women are treated because of this is the pet to threat pipeline. This is a term coined by Dr. Keisha Thomas, which when I made the written version of this topic, I posted it on my LinkedIn and I tagged Dr. Thomas because I wanted to give her credit. And she added me on LinkedIn and commented on my post. And you guys, I'm fangirling so hard. I've been a fan for a long time. I just didn't have the audacity to tag her. So if you have any audacity after seeing this, tag your heroes and definitely follow Dr. Thomas's work if you don't already follow her. She's amazing. So the pet to threat pipeline is very specific about the experiences of Black women at work. And as I said in the intro, a lot of people have been bringing this up on social media and who are not Black women who relate to this pipeline. So I'll tell you what it is and then I'll get into why so many people relate to this, in my opinion. So the pet to threat pipeline is when Black women go from being the pet, the token, look, I love this person. See, I'm not racist. I have a Black worker, which is like, you must know U.S. history to know why that's an issue. Until that Black woman is really good at her job. Not that she wasn't good, but she's learned the organization, she's got more experience, and now she becomes the threat. Because again, nothing threatens a class system and white supremacy like a Black woman succeeding. And misogyny. It's a threefer. Of all three major systems right there showing how full of shit they are. White supremacy, patriarchy, and classism. So the boss turns on her and suddenly she's not the pet, she's a threat. And she has an attitude and she's aggressive and all of these other things. And she starts getting iced out so that she doesn't get promoted higher. The boss starts talking shit about her to people higher up at the end when beforehand there was nothing to complain about. Now, my understanding, and feel free to tell me if you disagree in the comments if you know about this theory, my understanding is what makes pet to threat unique is the fetishization of Black women in this process. To me, it kind of seems like the professional version of I have a Black friend. I'm not racist, I have a Black woman here. Or we're not sexist, I have a Black woman here. She's on all of our company website photos. I bring her into certain meetings and we offload all the DEI work on her for free. If we have a bad press release, we're going to have her go to the front and answer it. But as soon as she tells me something's not working or she becomes better than me at something, now I'm going to throw her under the bus. I have heard Black men, when I've made videos about this before, say that they have a similar experience. And this is not based on, research that I've done. This is strictly informal, having conversations with my subscribers. It almost seems like there's a fet to threat for Black men because all of the comments gave sexual examples of white women coming onto them at work, hitting on them, and then when they're rejected, then they become the threat. Again, not a theory. I did find one article written by a Black woman professor where she talked a little bit about that experience, but I have not found a formal study. I will try to find that and link it in this video. I'm pretty sure I link it in my workplace bullying course. But all of these combined are how we end up in organizations that might seem quite diverse at the bottom, but the top has remained largely the same. And that's what's been part of what's been so maddening with all the DEI, anti-DEI affirmative action conversation is that while your entry level may look more diverse than it did 40 years ago, the top has remained largely the same. The executive level, anything above middle manager, is still predominantly male, pale, and multi-generations of wealth in. Now, why do so many people who are not Black women relate to the pet to threat pipeline? And there are some people who really get roasted for talking about this publicly when they're not a Black woman, which is fair because there's so much that erases the experience of Black women at work. And there needs to be some language for what goes on right now, because we are in a cultural moment of what they're calling the white collar bloodbath. There are literally headlines right now telling employees to sink or swim. And yet who that impacts the most so far in 2025 is the hundreds of thousands of Black women who have been laid off from their jobs. As I frequently say, I think my work on unwritten rules of work resonates with so many people because the system was made for such a narrow group of people. And we can see within the group of people that don't fit in, there are varying extents of types of harm, how far it goes, who's allowed to get away with what versus what is always a problem. You do not have to play the oppression Olympics with people to know that that means that the system has to change. You do not have to be threatened by people who experience more shit than you. You can instead get out of that hierarchy scramble and be like, so wait, you mean it benefits all of us to not just cater to the top 2%? It's possible, folks. I promise. Part of why I think pet to threat resonates with so many people is because of a finding in my research, which is what I call the unwritten rule of compliance. As I mentioned, is that you can't disagree with people in power. It is the expectation that you are silent and voiceless and just do what you're told, even if it goes against your expertise, even if it goes against why they said they hired you, even if they say they want your opinion, and even if it's fucking dangerous. So I think people relate to pet to threat because if you violate the unwritten rule of compliance and you are punished, then it can feel similar. And that experience of violating the unwritten rule of compliance can happen across race and gender and class groups. But in my research, I found that neurodivergent people, people of color, women, and people who are first generation working class, it impacts them more. And not even to the same extent. The system rewards people who conform. Workplaces are part of the system. You're valued as long as you conform and do not threaten the hierarchy. The pet to threat carries this additional layer of fetishization and tokenization, and that you're never going to fully fit in, and that you're going to be fetishized because you can't, and then you're going to be a threat and cast out. As soon as you may not always be in that pet position, as soon as you show the signs that you should actually be running the place. And the belief system that holds this all in place is the idea of the diversity hire. Now, inhale, exhale, my fellow pales. I was raised to be against affirmative action as well. I have talked about that openly. I was always told racism was wrong, but I was also given the example that affirmative action means that if you were going to go to a bakery that practiced it, that you'd be charged more for being white than if you were a person of color or a woman. Fortunately, I have learned and unlearned more since then. Unfortunately, a lot of people have not, and they have access to power, convincing other people of the same. And this comes back to any person who the system was not built for, who does well, is a threat to the system. And you can't say this is an unconscious bias, because it's very conscious. People call people diversity hires. Anybody who's not a white man who moves up is assumed to be a diversity hire, even though the system rewarding and built was only made by and for white men. But if a white man moves up within that system, it's never considered because of his race and gender, even though those were qualifying factors, the ones that really mattered before 1964. And if a diversity hire makes it past level 1, but nobody else is considered a diversity hire, then the belief is that there is something special about the people at the top that nobody else can have. Something that inherently makes them better and more capable, that nobody else is capable of learning or achieving. No matter what anybody else does through education, work experience, etc., they just don't have that thing. And that thing is white supremacy and classism, folks. And usually also patriarchy in there. So when you have that same group at the tippy top, though, how they stay in power, because again, there's so few of them, is having the rest of us pit against each other. So you can even have middle managers who are women and people of color who feel threatened because so few of them are allowed into the upper echelons that anybody below them they could see as a threat. Some of the worst managers I've ever had were other women. Not because women are inherently bad, but because so few of us are allowed a seat at the table that we view each other as competition. I can't speak to the experiences of people of color, but I have heard some people say either one thing or another. Either seeing someone like myself in power was awesome because it made me know it was possible, and maybe they were my sponsor. But I've also heard people say because they were the only person that I barely interacted with them because they didn't want to look like they were favoring me. And these tensions that we have with each other, that we fight at the middle levels and below, keep the upper echelons in power. And this is why your bully boss may act irrationally. It may seem the most logical to want you to do the best job so your team can do the best so they look great. But if that's not what your organization is rewarding, that is not what will happen. Also, people aren't logical. We love to think we are. We love to think we are, especially men, because they're so stigmatized for showing any emotion that's not anger. And yet most people are driven by emotion. You don't have to think of that as inherently a flaw, but realize it. Emotion drives behavior. That's why very charismatic leaders who don't have a plan but can make you feel something are who get followings. And remember, anger and fear are emotions. Your boss's fear of being replaced or becoming invisible is going to factor more than any logic in their situation. This is why bully bosses will sabotage their own team to preserve their ego. They're not looking at balance sheets or making their decisions based on data. They're making decisions based on how they feel. If they feel threatened by someone else on their team getting visibility, even if it makes the team look good, they will block it. How do you handle a bully boss? Let's build off Dr. Keisha Thomas's framework. So let's say phase 1, the pet. Your boss loves you, they praise your work, give you opportunities to tell other people how great you are. You feel valued and supported. You think, this is great, my hard work's paying off. Maybe I could work here for a really long time. I can see myself moving up here, there's opportunity. And then phase 2, you show your competence. You excel, you get recognition from other people. You demonstrate expertise that may not even exceed your boss's yet, but it shows a huge jump of growth in a short amount of time. Senior leaders start noticing you, and you start getting invited to things. Then phase 3, the threat emerges. Your boss starts thinking you could replace them, outshine them, expose their incompetence. They have a little identity crisis and their behavior shifts, which gets us to step 4, the undermining. You start getting maybe piled with work so that you can't show up to meetings. You don't have time to network with those other people that were noticing your excellence. You get criticism without specifics, just vague criticism. Nothing's good enough anymore. You're excluded from meetings. Information is withheld that's critical information for you to be successful. Credit for your work goes elsewhere, usually to the boss or someone who they're not threatened by, someone who's really barely functioning, but suddenly they're great because they're not a threat. And the goalposts move. You had to hit this almost impossible mark. You hit it, and now there's another one that's even crazier. Usually, this is where a lot of overworking starts happening. You're confused because you didn't do anything wrong, and suddenly nothing you can do is right. And if you're in a situation with a bully boss, you can start to take it out on yourself. You can wonder, how did I miss this? Why was I so naive? This could be because you're taught to blame yourself. When something goes wrong at work, we're conditioned to think that it's our fault because the company never takes responsibility. Also, if you have a religious background like me, you may have some of that guilt of, well, if I was deserving of goodness, then goodness would have happened. Catholic guilt right here. Because we also have bootstrapping beliefs in America and the belief that if we just worked hard enough, it'll be rewarded, it can also be conditioned in us to think anything that happens at work must be because we deserve it. Even as, again, we're being told sink or swim. 2, you may not notice this because bully boss behavior does not make sense. Why would someone want to sabotage their own team's success? Why would you waste organizational resources? Why would anyone want to make their jobs harder? But again, this isn't about logic, it's about emotion. 3, you're probably being gaslit by this boss. Oh no, I didn't mean to leave you out of the meeting. It was just a mistake. People make mistakes. Come on, people have never made mistakes. You've never made a mistake. You're overthinking it. Well, we're just in crunch time right now. I'm not specifically giving it just to you. And why is it my fault if you're suddenly underperforming? You used to give me so much better. And above all, remember that again, the people we're seeing in power are out of their damn minds. And that in a system that has been built by predators, do not blame yourself for not fitting in. It is hard. I am not going to deny that. Your livelihood is on the line. I'm not denying that. And yet it is a badge of honor to not fit in with these people. Okay? I'm here to help you navigate your needs and try to get you into power, because I hate living in a world run by this. But when you lay your head on your pillow at night, be proud that this is not an instinct for you. So if bosses pick on people who are too excellent, how are you excellent enough to stay, especially if you're part of a marginalized group and you don't want to be stereotyped as lazy or taking advantage? How are you excellent enough without becoming a threat? This is especially hard for, like we talked about, pet to threat with Black women. And I've also heard this from several Latina clients and followers on TikTok or subscribers on YouTube. Excellence is not what's actually rewarded. Mediocrity is. And remember, I made a video a few weeks ago, but I'll reiterate here. Think about this in terms of attractiveness. People don't actually like the person who wakes up gorgeous in the morning and just rolls out of bed and is just stunning. People like the person who tries really, really hard to be attractive, who puts a lot into their hair, who cakes on the makeup, who has like all the outfits and everything. Because we like seeing, most people like seeing that they are putting an effort towards conformity without actually being a threat. As much as some people might snicker and butterface and all that, we're actually more threatened by the person who is just gorgeous and may or may not put effort in, but you don't want the person who's actually gorgeous to show up to prom and they've actually put in effort. And yes, there's all kind of social rules on there on what's considered attractive, conventionally attractive, etc. But in general, the person who makes a lot of effort to look good, but is only passably pretty, is going to be treated better. It's fucked up. And the same applies at work. The person who's actually genius and actually busts their ass, people don't really like that person. They like the person who doesn't make them feel threatened. And yet it's a tight tightrope for people from marginalized backgrounds because they have to defeat the stereotypes of being incompetent and not hardworking, especially for Black Americans, but not be so excellent. So make zero mistakes, but don't be too excellent. So what do you actually do when you have a bully boss? First, name it. Don't believe they're gaslighting. Don't doubt your competence. If you have proof that you haven't changed your performance, that you're actually meeting what they told you, internalize that because it matters. Instead of asking yourself, what did I do wrong? Ask what your boss is afraid of. And step 2, you need to document everything. Save any emails, transcripts, etc. from your clients, coworkers, boss before, etc. talking about how great your work is. Track your contributions and wins in a running document. Keep all of this information not just in your personal or your professional email, but also in your personal, because at any time you could be locked out of the professional one. Don't violate company policy about data privacy, because that'll just backfire on you. Even screenshot positive feedback. Keep records of goals that were assigned and then changed. And document the absence when you've been excluded from meetings, left off email threads, withheld information, etc. I do have a course on this. It'll cost you $15. I know that really pisses some of you off, but a lot of work went into this course. It is a 6-hour, actually it's more than 6 hours because usually it's about an hour and a half. So it's really like a 10-hour course that you can do in parts. It's chopped up into really small pieces, so it's very ADHD friendly on how to navigate workplace bullying. And module number 2 is on documentation. And I partnered with How to Outsmart Your Toxic Boss, Hayesa Silva, who has succeeded with this in the United States with workplace bullying legally and is coming out with a game on how to outsmart your toxic boss. She shared all her secrets for winning her case. Those are in the course. 3, as your boss piles more and more on you and tries to keep you from maintaining relationships, it's very important that you do maintain relationships from those people who recognize your work, those lunches, etc. And the documentation will help here. If they're overpiling work on you and you can show that they're repeatedly piling work on you and not other people, that is helpful for the EEOC. That is helpful for HR. They have to show that they are targeting you. Not just that the whole team is getting more work, which is hard these days because a lot of teams are getting swamped. But more than any work you do, your relationships are what will keep you safer, because what's going to happen behind closed doors is they're going to nitpick your performance on your tasks no matter what. You need someone behind those closed doors who's advocating for you. 4, you need to communicate very strategically with this boss. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying manipulate, okay? I'm not saying even kiss ass. There are strategic ways to communicate to try to reduce the threat while you figure out your next move. I'll give you an example. Once I had a client who their boss desperately needed to feel smart, capable, and like everything was his idea. That man did not feel seen. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm not a therapist. Their therapist can figure out what happened to him in his life that he felt invisible. But I told that client, if you can talk about anything that the organization needs, but frame it in a way that he feels seen, or that if he doesn't do it, he's not going to be seen, he is much more likely to do the thing that the organization already needs. Since his motivation is not the success of the organization, his motivation is, see me. You don't want to manipulate him into going to jump off a cliff, okay? Don't use this for evil, people. There's plenty of that in power. You're just becoming them. I'm not an if you can't beat them, join them person. I'm an kick them off the cliff person. Maybe that wasn't the best example there. I may stop promoting them person. But if emotion drives behavior and you can appeal to the emotion of, you don't want to be the CEO that tanks the company, right? Or if you did this, imagine the positive press we would receive. Show that you are supporting his visibility and success and how it aligns with what your team already needs. And whatever your boss really cares about, this is what you should be doing. And the difference between manipulation and effective communication is very often empathy. You do not want to be, having somebody work against their best interest. But if you don't frame it in a way that they are interested, they're not going to listen. And this is why this is a whole module in my coaching program, where I do 2 coaching sessions with people on this and do worksheets. And we work on building this kind of strategic communication because it is such an essential skill. Another Succession reference there throughout the show, Jerry says, she's like the kind of fill-in CEO for a while, interim. She says, how does this best serve my interests? Tell me how this best serves my interests. She says this to Roman over and over again in season 3 and 4. And that is unfortunately how you have to handle these people. Now, is it fair? No. Is it in your job description? No. But if you want to move up, it is part of your job. And if you want to protect yourself, it's a good plan. Sometimes, too, people simply need to be reminded and explicitly told that you're not coming for them, that you're not out to get them. And if you are in an organization, which many have, another from my research is the unwritten rule of individualism, that there can only be one, that everything needs to be about people and not teams. It's not going to be baked into their system. It's not going to be what they assume. An upper middle class value and higher is individualism. And if this is a conflict for people from working class backgrounds because it's more collective and interdependent, you may have to explicitly tell them. They may have never heard before, Charles, I'm not coming to get you. Daniel, I'm rooting for you. Sharon, I am in your corner. I want to see you succeed, Leslie. I mean, just saying these things, you may be the first person who said this to them. Truly. And that's kind of sad too. That doesn't mean you take abuse. But if you start to notice that shift happening, it can sometimes help if you're really early. If you're like, Diane, I'm for you. How can I support you in this? And of course, there are also going to be situations where it's not salvageable, because if your middle manager or supervisor is able to get away with this and the uppers know it, the uppers are like that too. It's going to be that way all the way to the top, because whatever leadership allows is what they support. There's this idea, this is very common in white culture in America, of if I didn't say it, especially among middle class and higher, well, I didn't say it, so therefore you can't hold me to, it's plausible deniability. I didn't do it. I let it happen. It's lying by omission. If leadership knows that you have a sabotaging middle manager and they keep them, that is what they see as leadership. And they're fine with it and they're doing it to each other. There's no universal way to know, is there a path forward here? You can consider transferring to a different department. But look into, does your organization have good managers anywhere? Has a manager ever been held accountable when they've acted poorly? Is it worth the mental and emotional toll it's taking on you? And the economy is tight right now. They are doing mass layoffs. Do you have other options? Can you build something on your own on the side? Be careful before you jump in that ship. Finally, do as much as you can to protect your mental health during this process. If you can, get a therapist who specializes in workplace bullying. I know that you have to have insurance really to do that, but if you can, it is worth it. I always recommend the book, The Bully at Work. It's phenomenal. It's what my therapist assigned me years ago when I was going through this. I also do run a school community where you can build community with other people who are going through a similar experience, and that is where my workplace bullying course is. We also do live calls nearly every week, live group coaching. So if there are situations you're running through, you want to run them by us, and hear support from other people and know you're not crazy, that's a good place to go. And the bullying course does include strategies for, in addition to documenting, how to respond in the moment and how to build alliances. And do whatever's healing for you. For Haisa and I, who I collaborated with on documenting workplace bullying, we find music very healing. That's why on my YouTube page I have a collaborative playlist, the anti-bullying playlist. Feel free to enjoy, add your own songs, do whatever you need to do to survive and not let them break your soul. What song do you think is on there? If you're a leader watching this and you're like, wow, I do not want to support this in my organization, there's a lot you can do. And there needs to be started with, you need to be careful about how you are rating people's performance. Because narcissists, psychopaths, and sometimes Machiavellists are really good at knowing when to fake showing empathy. And so the best thing you can do is to include in promotions or having the people they have supervised rate them on scales of psychopathy and narcissism and such. And because that is where you will find out how they are when you are not there. Because they're going to kiss up to power when you're in the room, and it's the people below them that you need to be listening to. You need to have real accountability, not just policies, but policies you practice for people who show bullying behavior, because this does work against your organization's bottom line. This does work against work getting done if people are sabotaging their own teams. I give several examples of how this has happened in my book. And you need to address the unwritten rule of individualism, which promotes the zero-sum thinking. You must reward things that actually get the job done. And very often there does need to be some level of teamwork happening, but most organizations in corporate America do not reward teams. They only reward individuals. Something I learned to always tell my teams after seeing so much sabotage over and over again was I told them, and I enforced, if you come to me to sell out your coworker or undermine them, the first thing I'm going to do is ask them what they will tell me when I bring it up. You will not be rewarded for stabbing your coworker in the back. Now, if there's something y'all cannot resolve, I'm happy to mediate. When do you need help dealing with a bully boss versus when do you not? I want to be as honest as possible about where my services can help you and where they cannot, or where you should find other services. You probably don't need coaching for your bully boss if you have identified the problem, you have a clear path forward, your situation is pretty straightforward and you just needed the framework, you have a strong support system, or you're just going into another job anyway. Although I have coached several people who are like, I want to make sure I don't end up in this pattern again. In that case, I can be helpful. Okay, but if your mental health is good, you're confident in your next steps, you don't need this. Now, my book might be enough if you're dealing with a bully boss, if you're very early in recognizing these dynamics, you're a first-generation person trying to decode the workplace culture, and you just need some tips and some lingo on how to kind of grease the wheels. You're very early in your career. You're not high enough to really be a threat yet. You just needed to know that you're not crazy, and you want to make sure the situation doesn't estimate. That book is available for as low as $8.99 for the ebook on all the major ebook platforms like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, etc. Now, you probably need one-on-one coaching if your situation is very complex, you don't understand the interpersonal dynamics, and you're trying to survive while you're going through this. You're moving into leadership and you want to make sure you don't want to replicate these patterns. You need a customized strategy for your specific situation. You don't understand what went wrong or how to collaborate with this boss. But something I can't do for you is provide legal support. I am not an attorney. So while I can help you deal with the interpersonal day-to-day and understand the organizational dynamics, if it is so bad that you are ready to file with the EEOC, get an employment attorney. You do not need one to file with the EEOC, so if that's just not an option for you, go ahead and file. And my course, the Module 2, the bullying course, can help you do that. But it is always better when you have an attorney. And free resources I recommend that are not mine, but the Workplace Bullying Institute has been doing this globally for like 2 decades. That's who wrote the book I recommended, The Bully at Work. They have a lot of free resources on their website. They're really phenomenal. Check them out. So the bottom line, if you think your boss might be threatened by you and you're not sure why, the answer might be yes. And it's not because you did something wrong inherently. It can be because you showed more growth than they anticipated. The biggest lie that shocks a lot of first-generation professionals is that if you work really hard, you will get noticed positively and that you will be rewarded for it. That's not true, especially if you're a racial and gender minority and or you're neurodivergent or disabled in another way. Then you are also a threat to the system. You're not crazy. The system is broken. Your boss's insecurity is real and has real implications for your career and for others and the organization they're working for, ironically. Understanding what's happening is the first step. Protecting yourself is the second. And if you're in the position to change this systemically, you have some power and some social capital at your workplace. Please do. We need people like you. My goal is to get more people like you in positions of power. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you've tried any resources that would be helpful, please share. I will have linked in this video all the ones that I've referenced either in the description or in the cards that they let you put in YouTube videos. Let me know what your questions still are after this, and go stick it to them.